Imagine living in a world where knowledge is lost, cities crumble, and progress grinds to a halt. A time so bleak they called it the Dark Ages. But what if I told you that's completely false? What if I told you that the so-called Dark Ages were actually full of groundbreaking inventions, scientific discoveries, and intellectual growth? Stick around, because we're about to unravel one of the biggest myths in history. For years, we've been told a simple story. After the fall of Rome, Europe collapsed into 1,000 years of ignorance, superstition, and violence, conjuring up images of crumbling castles and plague-ridden streets. No progress, no innovation, just a grim age of suffering. But contrary to popular belief, the Dark Ages that roughly spanned from the 5th to the 15th century were a complex period filled with cultural, scientific, and social developments that laid the groundwork for the Renaissance. We'll explore the reasons behind the term Dark Ages and why it has been criticized by historians. You'll discover how advancements in agriculture, art, and philosophy flourished during these centuries, challenging the notion that this was merely a time of stagnation. So where did this myth come from? And why do we still believe it? Here's the thing. History is written by the winners, or at least by those who survived to tell the story. The myth of the Dark Ages didn't come from the people who lived through them. It was actually popularized much later by Renaissance thinkers and scholars who wanted to make their own time look superior by comparison. They painted the medieval era as a time of ignorance and decline, contrasting it with the brilliance of ancient Rome and Greece. But here's the truth. While Rome's fall in the 5th century did create chaos, it didn't erase human progress. In fact, in many ways, it set the stage for new civilizations, new ideas, and new innovations. Let's start with one of the biggest misconceptions: the idea that the fall of the Roman Empire plunged Europe into chaos overnight. The truth is far less dramatic. Rome didn't fall in a single catastrophic event. It crumbled gradually over centuries. And while parts of the empire did descend into disorder, other regions adapted and even thrived. The so-called barbarians who invaded weren't mindless destroyers. The Visigoths, for example, didn't just sack Rome, they established their own sophisticated kingdom in Spain, complete with written laws and flourishing trade networks. Speaking of trade, let's talk about the economy. You've probably heard that the Dark Ages were a time of economic collapse, but that's not entirely true. While long-distance trade declined, local economies adapted. Farmers innovated with tools like the heavy plow and the three-field system, boosting agricultural productivity. This new plow allowed for deeper tilling of the soil, making it possible to cultivate heavier, clay-rich lands that were previously unmanageable. Coupled with the practice of crop rotation, farmers could maintain soil fertility and increase yields, leading to more stable food supplies. These advances laid the groundwork for Europe's eventual population boom. And what about knowledge and education? The idea that knowledge completely disappeared is just wrong. Monasteries became the centers of learning, preserving and copying thousands of ancient texts, including works from Greek and Roman philosophers. Without medieval scholars, we might have lost Aristotle, Plato, and even parts of the Bible itself. And speaking of scholars, let's talk about the Islamic Golden Age, one of the biggest intellectual movements of the era. While Europe was reorganizing itself, the Islamic world flourished, making incredible advancements in mathematics and astronomy. Arabic numerals, algebra, and even the concept of zero. These were developed and refined during this time, and they later helped spark the Renaissance in Europe. Now, let's talk about science and technology. The medieval period saw the invention of watermills and windmills, the mechanical clock, and even early forms of eyeglasses. And let's not forget the printing revolution. While Gutenberg's printing press came at the end of the medieval period, it built on centuries of advancements in bookmaking, particularly from the Islamic and Chinese worlds. And let's not forget the arts and literature. Medieval literature gave us epic poems and stories being passed down through generations. Incredible works like Beowulf and the Divine Comedy not only entertained, but also provided insights into the values and beliefs of the time. Music evolved, with complex compositions paving the way for later Western classical music. Next, in the realm of creative engineering, how do you explain the jaw-dropping beauty of early medieval churches and cathedrals? Gothic cathedrals, with their towering spires and stunning stained glass, were architectural masterpieces. Structures like the Hagia Sophia in Constantinople and the Palatine Chapel in Aachen still stand as testaments to the artistic and engineering brilliance of the time. Even in medicine, which is often mocked as primitive during this time, medieval doctors made strides. They established some of the first hospitals in Europe, performed surgeries, and even used antiseptics and pain relief techniques that were ahead of their time. But here's the kicker: not everyone suffered equally during the so-called Dark Ages. While Europe struggled, the Islamic Golden Age was thriving. Cities like Baghdad and Cordoba became cultural and intellectual hubs, where scholars from different religions and cultures worked together to push the boundaries of human knowledge. So why do we only hear about the darkness? The term Dark Ages wasn't even used during the time. It was a label slapped on centuries later by Renaissance thinkers. They wanted to draw a sharp line between their era and the primitive past, erasing the achievements of 1,000 years to make themselves look like saviors of civilization. Here's the turning point. If the Dark Ages weren't dark, why does the myth persist? The truth is, it benefits a simple, dramatic narrative. A world of ruthless knights and backward peasants makes for a great story. But history is rarely that simple. Sure, there were hardships, plagues, famines, wars, but there were also triumphs, progress, innovation, and cultural exchange. The Dark Ages didn't kill progress. They simply changed its direction. Take the Carolingian Renaissance, for instance. Under Charlemagne, Europe saw a revival of education, art, and culture. Scholars flocked to his court, laying the intellectual groundwork for the later Middle Ages, and even the Renaissance itself. Or consider the Viking Age. While popular culture portrays Vikings as bloodthirsty raiders, they were also explorers, traders, and settlers who connected Europe to far-off lands like the Middle East and even North America. As we wrap up our exploration of the Dark Ages, it's essential to recap the key takeaways. The truth is that the so-called Dark Ages weren't 1,000 years of darkness and ignorance. This period was actually a time of significant cultural flourishing, technological advancements, and economic development. Without this era, the Renaissance, the scientific revolution, and the modern world we know today wouldn't have been possible. When we label an entire era as dark, we risk overlooking the people who lived through it. The farmers, the scholars, the inventors, the dreamers. They didn't just survive, they built the foundations for the world we live in today. So maybe it's time to stop thinking of the Dark Ages as a period of decline and start seeing it as a time of transformation. Messy, complicated, but full of stories worth telling. If this has made you see the Dark Ages in a whole new light, don't stop here. Hit that subscribe button for more myths busted, stories uncovered, and secrets revealed. And let me know in the comments, what's another piece of history you think might be a lie? Your support helps us create more informative and engaging content. See you in the next one.